Are we recording right now? Oh, I didn't know that. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
You're good.
Yeah, we just figured we'd just let it roll and just chat.
Yeah. So I own what's up, buddy? Yeah, so I own Bay State Wildlife. My background as far as like I struggled in school. I had a major learning disability, which nowadays are diagnosed in kids like ADHD, all that stuff. I just couldn't stay focused. I graduated high school in 1993, and there were like 196 kids that graduated from Canton High School in 96. There were 3 kids dumber than me, basically, on paper, right? When I was in the 8th, I got kicked out of the 8th grade. It was like a slew of things that happened, like in a short period of time. I was always a bigger kid. I never bullied anybody. I always was one of those guys that always stuck up for the kids that were bullied, but I always messed around. I was always up to something. My class of 1989 8th grade yearbook, I had like a stack of they're called disciplinary forms or something like that. They used to we called them white slips when we were kids in middle school. And one of them was like putting other kids in a dangerous situation. So we used to watch wrestling when we were kids. Back then it was WWF. You guys ever watch wrestling? Yeah, like Stone Cold Steve Austin. Yeah. So we'd all watch it on like Fridays, and Mondays we'd come into school and we'd like reenact the moves. So this guy named Ronnie John Studd, Andre the Giant, Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
So Garvin beat Hulk Hogan that week or something like that. You know how they all like their patented moves?
Let's see it.
Oh, come on, dude. It was a real simple one.
It's right there.
He did a leg drop, like he come from side to side. What's the Rock's patented move? The people's elbow, dude.
Dude, I know one person in their one move.
I know the Undertaker's. He would like lift you up.
Yeah, that was called like the. It was something like the Tombstone or something.
Yeah. Tombstone.
What move do you know?
Dude, who's the guy? He was like he was always a bad guy, but it was like he would like drop your head on his. It was like this, and he just dropped.
No, that's Stone Cold Steve Austin. That was a Stone Cold Stunner.
Is that what it is?
I can name any wrestler's patented move. In fact, if you want, Max is over here, and I'll show you a couple of them. We were away last week, and we wrestled in a hotel room. I pinned him twice in like 30 seconds. So my move it's called the small package. I forget who used to do it. But anyways, you can't get out of it. Could you?
Wait,
I bet if your dad wasn't here right now, I could get him in, he wouldn't get out of it. If I got him in. This move was called the Ronnie Garvin Stomp. So what he'd do is like he'd throw you on the ground, and then he'd be standing up and he'd start stomping on your foot. And then you stomp your knee, then your leg, and then go up and all the way around you, and then you jump on. So we were all like in school on Monday or something, and we were doing that. We take each other and like slam each other and then do that move. And I was always like one of the bigger kids, so I could pick up people that other kids couldn't pick up. So there was this kid who I picked up and slammed, and me and my buddy Wag, we started the Ronnie Garvin Stomp, and he was like laughing, having fun. Well, there was this girl that was in class. What's the girl's name? She was like, actually, she was in a wheelchair, but she ratted on me all the time. She used to just follow me around school and always tell on things I did, rat me out. So
would she like follow you in her wheelchair?
She would follow me in her wheelchair. And yeah, a little background on Yvonne. So her brother was murdered in Canton by a kid named. There's like a documentary on it. So basically, this kid Rob Matthews invited Sean, her older brother, who was this big kid, over the house, and then said, "Hey, we're going to so and so's house. I got his baseball bat. I got to return to him." It was in the middle of. They walked from Rod's house to and he beat the kid to death with a baseball bat. Yeah, if you Google it, it's crazy. Yvonne was his little sister. She was in a wheelchair. She was like special needs. I mean, I hate even saying it, but like I hated her because she used to like constantly rat me out. Like anything I did, like she'd tell the teacher. So she went and wheeled over to the teachers and said, "Mark Thomas and Jimmy are beating up Josh." And teachers come. We're in the 8th grade, and the teacher's like, "Josh, are you okay?" And he could have been like, "Yeah, we're just messing around." So that was my suspension for putting a kid. Then same thing. I was in school like a week later, and someone remember the little glass stink bombs, the little capsules? Mm-hmm. They're like, yeah. Someone gave me those, and we were all up the stairs, and I threw one on the ground, and like, I don't want to be like the guy, it's like it wasn't me, but like, yeah, it was me. So the stink bomb, they had to evacuate the school, but it wasn't like a bomb, it was this little capsule.
It just makes
it's like rotten eggs, yeah. Then the final straw was there was this girl in my 8th grade class her name was Holly. and like I had a crush on her. So my name's Thomas, her last name was Sheree. We sat side by side because of alphabetical order. And I was always trying to like, you know, hit on her, I guess. We were in the 8th grade. So I told her how I had rabbits. We had a bunch of rabbits where we grew up. We used to raise rabbits. There was this one rabbit named Jasper who was like my favorite rabbit. And she's like, oh my God, I want to see him. I'm like, well, come over to school someday and you can see him. And she was like, live on the other side of town and this and that. So one time I was like, he's wicked chill. I could bring him into school. And she was like, yeah, I bring him to school. So I put him in my back and I brought him into school. And we were like, teacher was like this older lady who never really knew it was. So I pulled out the rabbit. I'm like, look at it. She's like, oh my God. She was holding it and stuff. And then she handed it back to me. And Yvonne, she was behind me, instantly put up her hand and was like, Mark Thomas is a rabbit.
So it's just nonstop.
Nonstop. I mean, like a week before that, my shop teacher had like a grinder. And he was like, yeah, he's like, you know, he's showing us how to grind stuff. I was like, I have this axe at home I'd love to bring in to shop. And he's like, well, bring it in after school someday. Like, what if I bring it in during school? He's like, yeah, he was wicked cool. He's like, yeah, I just don't. So I had my backpack and I brought it to shop class and sharpened it. And we were in the library later that day. My buddy was like, talking like, yeah, I got my axe sharpened. And I opened the bag up and showed it to him. He's like, oh my God, I saw it. Told the librarian. She came over and was like, what do you got in your bag? And I was like, nothing. And she opened the bag and she saw the axe. So I had all these things kind of like compiling, but back to the way I started my business, because that's what you guys first asked. And basically, my father came into school, my mother, and I'll never forget my 8th grade principal, Mr. Howard, one of the people in this world I hate more than, I'm sure he's dead by now. He turned to my parents and was like, I've been a teacher for 30 years and a principal for 30 years, whatever. He's like, this kid's going to be dead or in jail by the time he's 18. And my parents like kind of like, well, oh yeah, he's a trouble. He was like, no, I'm serious. And I was like, I'll never forget that. It kind of gave me like motivation in life. Because then, he was like, look, we're kicking him out of, we don't want him in the school anymore, but they just came up with a program called Charms Collaborative. Charms Collaborative was Canton, Holbrook, Avon, Randolph, Milton, and Stoughton. All the bad kids from those towns are kids that, whether they struggle like brutally academically
or
yeah,
juveniles.
Lucky for me, the program they did it. That was the first year, and that year it was in Canton, in the Gallup Middle School in Canton. So it was like one room dedicated to it. So picture me, I'm like, I don't know, how old are you? Yeah,
14.
Like I got so many friends in school, and like I got along with everybody, and like I'd have to literally like recess would go on, not recess, but gym class, let's say, for all the normal kids. And then they'd be coming out, and I'd have to be going in, like, we were almost like, we weren't handcuffed together. We were like single file. We had like these, they weren't security guards, but they were teachers. I had Mr. St. Louis and Mr. And they were like these teachers / that would follow us into the gym. And like, I'd walk by all my friends and be like, what's up, Thomas? I'd be like, no. I remember that when I was in the class, like one of the first days, it was like this kid from Stoughton. And like all of a sudden, he said something to me, and I said something back. We got an argument. And the teacher was like, okay, clear the room. And they cleared the room out, I swear to God. And they had us get in the middle of the room and like fight. You know what I mean? Like, he was like, here's the deal, no foreign objects. You know, when we say stop, it's over, this and that. And I'm like, okay. And like,
this is like Fight Club in a prison.
Dude, it was like, I'm like, all right, we're going to wrestle, right? So I'm all about it. I used to love wrestling. And I get in there and I'm like, and the kid like throws a full-blown like haymaker at me. And it turned into this thing. Anyway, I get him in a headlock. And I'll never forget, he was 14, he had like zits all over his face, and like I had him in a headlock, and his zits were popping. He was this nasty kid. I don't think he ever took a shower in his life. He had like work boots on, but then when it was over, the teacher, Mr. Roder, Mr. St. Louis, like made us stand up and shake hands, and it was like a hierarchy was created. You know what I mean? And like,
yeah, who could win? Yeah,
but then the kids in the class, like I realized most of them were good kids. I don't want to say like me, but like I never meant any harm. I was just like, I was a bigger kid that was always like trying to like my parents, we lived in the middle of nowhere kind of in town. And I didn't play baseball and sports. Like you couldn't play football because you had to be under a certain weight class. Papa Wana was around then. So like I had all this energy, and I was a kid that like I had no neighborhoods around me. So I went to school, and that's where I played with my friends, and like I became friends with a lot of these kids, and they were good kids. They just came from most of them came from rough homes, rough backgrounds.
Because they're pulling from all over, right?
They're from all the towns around. This one kid, Eric, I'll never forget, he became like my best friend, and he was literally raising his brothers and sisters. His father left, and his mother, I think, was a drug addict, and she was always in and out of rehab. And he was like in the 8th grade, taking care of. Yeah, it was crazy. I actually found out a few years ago. I saw him a couple of times after later on in life, and he wasn't doing that good. Then he got in a motorcycle. He died in a motorcycle. Yeah, it was so. Anyways, then I went to high school, and everything changed when I went to high school. It was like, like I kind of became like mature and stuff like that. And then I found I could play football. You know what I mean? Which was huge. But I was so like into hunting, like it was something that I always say even to this day. It's not like a pastime for me. It's like a passion, and like no matter what goes on in life, like when the fall comes, I got like tunnel vision to hunt. It's just like, and like I remember getting to like if I had a girlfriend, like we break up during hunting season because I was always hunting, right? Football came, and when you play football, and you play it in the fall. Deer season, dude. It's like November, I'd be out in the field and I'd be like, I don't want to be here. I want to be in the woods. And so that was a big distraction for me. Not like I would have ever gone anywhere beyond, but if I had the size, I was 6'5" and I was like 280 pounds. I was in good shape because I worked out all the time for football in the off season. I guess maybe I could have gone to a good college or something, but I struggled academically, and I wasn't. It was always like my coaches used to say to me, if I had your size and your ability, like I would have probably gone to a D1 school and played football. And you got all this size and ability. I remember my senior year in high school, we had our Thanksgiving Day game coming up. We had like a mediocre team, but we hadn't lost to Stoughton in 30 years. It was like this huge thing. Like you'd be at Dunkin' Donuts in the morning, like some old time, like, you guys got Stoughton coming up, you ain't gonna lose, right? And we'd be like, well, I went to Maine because during that Thanksgiving week you get the days off. So like we had like the Friday off. I went to Maine, and like I was up there hunting, and I was getting ready to leave. We got like a foot of snow, and I was like, oh my God, I want to stay. So my father called my football coach, Coach Tricome, and was like, hey, we're up here in Maine. I really don't want to drive home because the snow's too deep and it's not safe. And I had my Jeep, and like my buddy with me, EJ, and we were like captains of the football team, and we're away. And the coach's like, oh no, it's fine, Mr. Thomas. He's all good. Just make sure he's at practice tomorrow by 3 o'clock. No, make sure he's in school tomorrow by 7 o'clock. If he misses the day of school before Thanksgiving in practice,
you won't play.
He won't play. Eligible for the game. Yeah, you're not eligible. So I was like, I turned to my father and I was like, what the heck? And my father's like, you got to go. So I got in my Jeep. I had a buck I killed, and I put him over my back tire. This is the truth. We were in blaze orange. We had all of our hunting clothes, and we drove all night long. But my Jeep only went like 50 miles an hour, and it's like 8 hours if you're driving fast. Long story short is we came down Route 128, and we took off the exit into Canton. And I'll never forget, it was like 6:45. We had to be in school by 7. And I'm like, dude, we can't go to my house right now and then go to school. We're not going to make it. We're going to be late. So I pulled into the parking lot of Canton High School, and everybody I see to this day brings it up. And I had a dead buck on the back of my truck, and there was snow, and it snowed back home too. I had a dead buck on the back of my truck. I had two 30-06 rifles in the back seat, which I'm doing that nowadays, pulling to the schoolyard.
I mean, you're gonna get arrested.
Get arrested nowadays. And we had blaze orange on. We had our Mickey Mouse combat hunting boots, and I walked into school. Go in a homeroom, and I sat down, the bell rang, like I was on time. And like 30 seconds later, the phone rings in the class, and the teacher's like, oh, yeah, Mr. Thomas, go to the principal's office. So I go down to the principal's office, and the guy, his name was Doc, and like, he was the worst. He was such an ass. And like, he's like, what the hell are you doing bringing that thing in? Like, it was dripping blood. It was like, you know what I mean? And he was like, get it off the property right now. If I do, I'm going to be late. I came to school. He's like, don't worry about it. He's like, just go. So I got up and I walked out of the room. And I walked back in. I was like, hey, I'm like, can EJ come with me? I need help getting the deer off the truck. He's like, yeah, take him. So me and EJ left. We spent the whole day slowly hanging our deer. We tied 0-0. We had driving rain. We rinsed the rain. And we tied 0-0. And then the next year they lost, but we didn't lose, so it was good.
So like going through high school and like, you hit 18 and now it's like you gotta do something, right? School is no longer a thing. Did you know you were gonna be like in the business?
No.
So what did you start?
A little
doing?
backstory is my family owns funeral homes, right? And it was always like, even like when we were in high school, we all got, yeah, but I hate the funeral home. I hate, like nothing, I'll stick my hands in a dead deer, and like dead human body to me is the most
Oh, so it was
Did
like,
you ever
it
do
was-
work there growing up?
Oh yeah, so like my father, when I was a kid, he'd be like, you go to school with you go to work with your dad on Saturday. I go to the funeral home and it was like, oh, it was disgusting.
They had like crazy like events.
Oh, dude, I could go on. Some of the stuff I saw, like I was telling my son one time, like, when you're a parent, you get so worried about your kids getting hurt, right? And like, my father, his idea of like, I don't know what they call it, like hard parenting or whatever. My father was like, one time me and my buddies were skating down the pond, down the street from our house, and he came down and said, get off the ice, it's not safe. And I'm like, yeah, you could drive a truck on. He's like, no, paranoid everything. So, like, a year later, I come home and he's like, tomorrow you're coming to the funeral home with me. I'm like, I don't want to go to the funeral home, Dad. He's like, nope, you and your brothers are coming with me. So he brings us to the funeral home. We walk in the morgue, and he goes, all right, guys, this is what happens when you skate. Right hand of God, he pulls the whatever you call it, the sheet off, and laying on the morgue, I'll never forget to this day, are two little kids, completely covered in seaweed and sediment from the bottom of the pond. They had all their clothes on and they had ice skates on. And he said these two kids were down at Kelly Pond, which is in Hyde Park. They went skating, and after school or whatever, and they fell through. And I remember seeing it on the news, and they both drowned. They were brothers. One fell through, and the other goes, "This is what happens when you skate or this is what happens when you go on pond." He goes, "If you want to skate, go to the skate rink." And then like later on, I remember a kid that died drinking driving. His last name was and he was drafted or whatever by the Philadelphia Phillies. And I brought Max there one time to the cemetery in Canton, and it was from like 1983 or 84. This kid had life handed to him on a silver platter. He was blessed as a baseball player, and he went out with his friends one night, and his friends were drinking, and the kid driving was drunk, and they hit a tree somewhere in Canton, and everybody in the car died except for the kid driving. And he was like, "This is what happens if you drink and drive." And I could go on and on about different things. This is what happens when you do drugs. You show them, like it was just like all the different things. So that's my life, like growing up in the funeral business, and people be like, "You're so blessed, you have to worry about a job." And so my choices, my parents were strict about stuff. My choices as I got out of high school were, you got to do something. We'll give you 1 year. You can live here. So my year was up, and because that fall I went to Maine for a month hunting. I lived like a rock star, and then it was like, you got to do something. So I enlisted in the Marines, and I had like one paper to sign and take a physical. And this guy, I'll never forget, his name was Staff Sergeant Marty. He was the guy that recruited me or whatever, and I was ready to go in the Marines. My parents were like cool with it. The world wasn't really violent then. There weren't wars going on before Desert Storm. Maybe it was after Desert Storm. But anyways, I just signed one paper and take a physical on a Friday, and I woke up in the middle of the night on Thursday, and I was so sick, and I mean literally I could not even move the next day. And I lay in my bed the whole day, and I'm like thinking about like, my mother was like, "You really want to go in the Marines? Why don't you just go in the funeral business?" And I'm like, "I don't want to go in the funeral business." And anyways, I changed my mind, and I said I won't go in the funeral business. So I applied for school down in Texas. It was called Commonwealth Institute of Funeral Services. And my mother said, "Look, we'll pay for you to go to college." Now, I never really left New England ever in my life. I never been on a plane. And I said, "Fine, I'll go." So that was in the following September. So I'll never forget, my parents dropped me off in South Station. I got on a train, and I had all my stuff. I had a bank card. My mother said, "I'll put $100 on it a week." They found me an apartment. I went down to Houston, to Spring, Texas, right outside Houston. And all of a sudden, here I am, like, I get dropped off on a train, and I got to go to college or whatever it is for 2 years for funeral directing. You live down there, and you get 2 months off. Yeah, I live down there, I get 2 months, I come home, and then you go back. Well, I get to school the first day. I always struggled academically, but like I kind of had like tunnel vision that like, I gotta get my degree. If not, I'm gonna get out and I'm gonna be like the low man at the funeral home. I'm gonna have to do stuff that so I learned how to embalm. I learned how to do I took anatomy, chemistry, business, everything. It was all crammed. It was like a cram course. But like I graduated like in the top 10 of my class, and every kid in my class, there were 100 kids in the class, like 96 or something, they all like had already gone to school, college, and then some of them were older too, and then they were going to get their funeral director's license, and they had to take a board test, which was like, it was like so stressful because if you pass it, you're good. If you don't pass it, you have to wait a year before you can take it again. What?
It's like a law school, like to take that bar exam.
Yeah, just
You
like
have to
being
wait
a
a long
doctor.
time.
It's like, you have to go to school. I don't know if it's as hard as getting a law degree or taking your bar test, but your bar exam. But it was hard, and I'll never forget. I took it, and I'm like, I failed it, and I got like an 86 on it. So I came back from Texas, and when I lived in Texas, like I just found like that there's something more in this world than Massachusetts. Like, I mean, life down there was just unreal. The economy was good. The people were so nice down south. Massachusetts is full of like, seriously, like assholes. Like, from the girls to the boys to the men to the women. Like, you go down, when I was down in Texas, I remember being like at a bar one night and there was this beautiful girl, and like I walked over and started talking to her, and she like talked to me, and she was like so cool. And then the other night I asked her for her number. She's like, oh, I got a boyfriend. And I'm like, oh, and she's like, yeah, he's right over there. And he's like, hi. Like, there's just people are like so cool down there, like and chill and laid back. Back in Massachusetts, people are like suck. The way they drive. And I mean, obviously I'm one of them, I live there, you know, but I couldn't deal with the heat down there. Like, I hate hot weather, and it was so hot and muggy, and like, but everything else was great. There was no change of seasons. Massachusetts is the worst place to live, I always say, but it's the best place. If you can't make a living in Massachusetts, then you gotta be like completely, something's wrong. You can start a landscape company and make it. But I came back, and I had my degree in Wales. My father basically, just to sum it up, handed me the keys to his funeral in Hyde Park. And it was a thriving business. I was making like 150 grand a year, driving around in a Cadillac with my 3-piece suit on, you know, running stuff. But my first weekend but I hated it though, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You work wakes, and like you have to be there for 4 hours, and you stand there and open the door. Hi, ma'am. Sorry for your loss. All that. I hated that aspect.
That's a lot of energy to be around.
It is. You know the truth though, like, because I wasn't married. I didn't have a girlfriend then. Like, I met so many girls working at the funeral home. Because like, think about it. Like, your grandmother dies, and you're not like, it's not like your mother dies. Your grandmother dies, and you come home from college, and you're at the wake, you know, and you're kind of bored. And I go over and start talking to them, and next, you know. I dated a lot of girls. I met a lot of people that were cool. But you're right. You can't like, you got to have a line you draw, because it's an upsetting situation. So you can't be like, hey, what's going on? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a party.
It's not a
You can't
party.
just,
Right on the money.
Yeah, go up to this girl at this funeral home and that.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry for your loss.
I did sometimes. And
Hit the bar.
yeah, it was great. But like, as far as that goes, but then I also did all the removals. So like when someone dies, I have to go and remove them.
Oh, did you go to like where they died?
Where they died, yeah.
Oh,
So
man.
like, funny story, like I was telling your father this one time, and he thinks it's the funniest story ever. I'm like, whatever, but like, so when we were in school, we had to write, before we graduated, everybody in class had to write a thing on why they went into the funeral business or something interesting that happened. So the beginning of the class, I'm at the end, Thomas, the first row of people, like, I was working, I was just a regular person, and my grandmother died, and I went to the funeral home, and they start crying, and they're like, you know, and I realized, like, these people don't care about my grandmother, and I decided I'm going to go in the funeral business to make a change. And it was like so boring. So I'm like, I'm going to write something interesting. So I had this story, and it's a true story. My story was called Bring Gloves. And it was this guy that I was working a wake, and this is before I went to school. For the year or two I was out of high school, and I just worked wakes. And this guy who worked at the funeral, his name was Mark Harris. He's like, hey, we got to do a removal. And I'm like, oh shit, it was freezing cold out. But I got to leave the wake, so we get in the hearse, and we're driving to this house in West Roxbury, which is like 10 minutes away. We get there, it's this apartment building. It was like the projects, basically. And we walk in, and we go down the hall, and there's like this door we open, and I open the door, and it was like 1,000 degrees. I didn't think heat could be that. And there was no smelling, and we're walking around, all of a sudden I look, and on the couch, laying there, like he's taking a nap, is this dude, completely buck naked. And he's like laying there like like this, like with his head like this, like kind of like he's watching TV, and the TV's still going, and he was dead as a mackerel, right? And I'm like, wow. I said, Mark, I said, we don't ever really do funeral homes. Like if you're Italian, you bury only Italian people. The black people go to black funeral homes. Also, like, we don't ever really do like remove, like we don't ever bury African American people. And he's like, that guy's not black. I'm like, he's friggin' as black as coal. And he's like, nah, dude, he's decomposed. And I'm like, he doesn't smell. And he's like, and this guy was such a ball buster. So he was like, yeah, you'll understand. So we bring the stretcher in and we put it down on the, at the level of him. He's like, all right. He's like, you got your gloves on? And I'm like, yeah. So I put my gloves on. He's like, all right, ready? He goes, you grab the, I'm going to grab the feet. You grab the hands and we're both put them on the stretcher. So I grabbed the guy's arm, and I'll forget, they were like stiff as a board. He goes, 1, 2, 3, and I grabbed him like by here, his arms were kind of like crossed. I go to grab the guy and put him on the stretcher, and like my hands just like slipped. It's called skin slip when you're decomposing. It means all the skin came off his arms, and you could hear like a sound, and like it was the most disgusting thing. And like the second we moved the guy, this odor came out that was like, it makes sewage smell good. It was so bad. I'm like, oh my God. And he's like, here, he throws me a jar of Vicks. I was so like freaking in state of shock from the smell and what was going on. I take the jar of Vicks and I grab a thing of it and I go to stick it in my nose. Well, I take my gloves off. So I have this friggin' spoogy stuff all over my hands. And I'm like, oh my God. Well, I started puking. I had to run to the bathroom. And he's like, keep yourself together. So luckily, there was no one there, though. So we put the guy on the stretcher. And I'm like, oh my God. And now we wrap him in there's like a bag you zip up. And the smell wasn't as bad. So now we start wheeling the guy out. And I'm like doing everything I can not to puke anymore. We go and now we get to the stairs. And like I'm leading the way. And like just when we got to the stairs, all of a sudden the car pulls up. And in comes the family of this guy who lived in other parts of the country, a state, or whatever, and they showed up. And I'm going down the stairs, and Mark he's like, oh man, when we get to the bottom of the stairs, you can view him and this and that. And like, I'm going, and like the stretcher's like lifting up in front of me, and I'm trying to look behind me. It was like icy and stuff. I had like a suit on, and all of a sudden, like I hear like this sound. It sounded like a bag of water broke open. I'm like, what the frig is that sound? This like liquid came out of the bag and like started pouring down my chest. I'll never forget. I'm like looking down. It looked like yellow throw up stuff. And it was going all down my shirt and like down into my pants and my suit. I'm like, oh my God. And I look up at Mark and he's like biting his lip trying not to laugh. I'm like, what the frig? And like I get down the bottom and the lady comes over and she's like, can I see him? And I'm like looking the other way and it was like this warm like pudding stuff. It was all over me. To this day, I can remember the smell and the feeling of it. And I'm like, oh my God, oh my God. And the lady's like rubbing his face and she's like, oh my God, the odor. And that was the only thing that it was like a skunk. So he zips the bag up. We put the guy in the stretcher. I run over to and like one of the things they teach you in field working business, no matter what's going on, you don't laugh, you don't smile when someone's crying. Like you gotta
maintain composure.
You gotta be compassionate, maintain composure. So I get in the hearse, and I'm like, oh my God. He's like, keep it together. We turn, we go around the corner. I'm like, stop. And I ran into like a 7-Eleven parking lot. I stripped down completely nude. I swear to God. And I took my shirt and like I covered myself and I jumped back in the car. He's like, what are you doing? I'm like, dude, it's all over me. And it was like waxy consistency. It like hardened.
And did you just leave your clothes?
I left all my clothes right there. Mark died like 5 years ago. He used to come over our house all the time and he'd tell the story about it. And so we get back to the funeral home. He's like, what are you gonna do now? And I literally ran buck naked with like my shirt covering myself out into the back of the funeral home. I had my truck parked there and I jump in the truck. And what I have in the truck, I had camouflage clothes. I put my camo on and I'm like going to run back into the funeral home to finish the wake. He's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, I gotta work the wake. He's like, you can't work the wake like that. And I'm like, oh yeah. So I flew home and I got in the shower. I swear to God, I don't think I came out of that shower for 4 hours. And for 3 days, I could still smell that guy. Yeah, so I told.
And that's the story you told?
That's the story I told. And I got like an A for telling. We had this professor's name was Mr. Moen, Dr. Moen. And he was like this wicked Texan guy. He's like, Mr. Thomas, that's the best story I ever heard. Did you make that up? And I'm like, no, I didn't make it up. And he's like, wow, great. I got like an A on it. But It was back to the funeral home. I worked that job, and my father handed me the keys to the place. In my first weekend that I was on call by myself, my parents went away on vacation to like the vineyard. I got a call, and it was like this lady, and she was like, anyways, so I get a call, and I had a beeper, and my beeper goes off, and it's like, you gotta call the service, and they're like, yeah, you have a death call, you gotta call this lady. So I call, her name was Mrs. Curran. And I said, hey, Mrs. Curran. She's like, is this Mark? I go, yeah. She goes, oh, I met you before. Which people always say, when you work at the film, you meet so many people. I remember who she was. She goes, you know my son Craig? And I'm like, yeah, Craig. And she's like, well, he was killed tragically last night in an accident. And I said, oh, what happened? And she said, he was down at the Trestle in Hyde Park. There was this place all the high school kids used to go to and drink. It was like an old abandoned train yard. And the freight trains pull up at night, and they unload for 10 hours, whatever. Then they leave. So you know what a freight train's like. So they were all there drinking and partying, and I couldn't remember who the kid was, but I said I did, and they were leaving. Well, you have to walk all the way around a freight train. And sometimes kids would crawl underneath it, you know, because you get from point A to point B, but you got to walk like a mile to get on the freight train. So they crawl. Well, he crawled. He was drunk, and he crawled, and once he got underneath the thing, it started moving. And he was laying there, and his best friend was right there, and I guess he was a witness. And half of them were like, hey, still, and the other half were like, dude, when the caboose goes by, it's like something low that's gonna catch you, and like, get out. And he tried timing it, you know what I mean?
Yeah, like waiting for the wheels.
Exactly. He timed it wrong, dude. The friggin' train went right over his arm and right across his neck and took his head completely off. And I was like, holy shit. And she's like, and they also teach you to always try to say something. And so I'm like, well, at least you didn't suffer and it was quick. What else am I gonna say?
Yeah, no, honestly, I don't even know what I would have said.
Yeah, so she's like, all right. So anyway, she's like, look, me and my husband are gonna come down. So I got the phone. First time handling a case, right? I get to the funeral home early, and I get all my stuff together, and I'm waiting. She comes in, they come in, and the second they came in, I'm like, oh my God, I know who your son is. He was the nicest kid, and he was in the CYO, which is like part of the church, and he used to come to the funeral home every year, and we'd make a donation. He was like, I mean, when I tell you this kid was stellar, like everything, nicest kid, and big kid, and he was like a gentle giant, so we started making arrangements, and like, you're also not supposed to cry. And I'm not like a very emotional person, but like, you know, yeah, like something like that. I kept fighting. It was so sad, and it went on. Well, now everything's done. We make the arrangements. I felt like I did a good job, and they're like, we really want to see him. Can we see him? And I'm like, you know, you're see him. Wait till the funeral. Wait till the wake. And they're like, well, will it be an open casket? And I'm like, we have the guy who does our embalming, like, he's the best. I go, if you want an open casket, I'll make sure there's an open casket one way or the other. And they're like, well, we heard he was decapitated. And I'm like, we'll figure it out, don't worry about it. So anyways, one of the rules is when you go, someone says to you they want to see their deceased loved one, and you say no, a year later they can sue you, right? They can be like, hey, you never let us see our deceased loved one, and we're traumatized mentally. It's just a thing you gotta, and I never did that. I went in the morgue and like checked out the situation. You want to make sure it's clean.
Yeah.
Yeah, if there's other people in there, you want to make sure they're covered. And my father runs like his funeral home by the books, like as far as like legal goes, as far as the rules go. So I go I'm like, if you really want to see him, she's like, yeah. So I go, okay. And I go, hang on one second. I open the door, I look in, and there's a slab, and there's like, you know, a thing covering a body, and there's no other bodies. I'm like, well, that's him. So I'm like, come on in. And they come in, and I'm like, you sure you want? Yes. So I pull the thing back, and I'll never forget to this day. And there's Craig, a tattoo of you know what clattering is?
No.
Irish. It was a big thing. So it's an Irish ring that it's like a ring that made. I think it's Saint. I don't know what saint it is, but it's a ring, and it's like a heart with like hands around it, and like the Irish people wear them, and like if it's facing with the heart down, that means you're single. If it's facing with the heart up, it's either way. He had a tattoo of a clattering on his shoulder. I remember he used to come down in the summertime with like a tank top on, you know, to the funeral home, and like I'm like, oh my God, I remember that. And it like brought back exactly who he was in my mind. I'm like, oh God. So I pulled the thing open, and there he is, but he had no head. He was missing half his arm and his head, and it was like, you know, and you're naked when you're on the slab. And I'm like looking at him, I'm like, and like, they're like, both like, oh my God. And like, I'm like looking at him and I'm like, I look to the right and there's like a stainless steel table. And there on the table is his head. When you got him back from the medical examiner, they take his head and they put it on like, it's like a wooden thing like this, and they put a dowel. So that way when they put his head in a bag or like that, the blood will all run to one side. So they put his head on a dowel. And there's his head, and there in the bag next to his head is his friggin' hand. And I'm like, and they turned at the same time I did, and they were like, and it was friggin' horrible. One eye was open, one eye was shut, his mouth was open. There's their son's head laying on the thing on the table, and I'm like, oh my God. And they're like, she turned and started screaming, he started screaming. And it was like shame on me because I should have gone in and seen that, but I didn't. I just
like the checks and.
Oh, it was like, I'm like, these poor people. So then the weight came and went. They got, I don't want to say they got over it, but that part of it could have been so much worse. I got them out of there and I explained to them because they want an open casket anyway, so weight came and left. It was freaking horrible. My parents were still away. I was like losing my mind. I was so stressed out. And it came and went. I thought I did a pretty good job. They were very happy, but they were so emotional. I mean, they had a son and a daughter. So then a year later, maybe it was 6 months later, I had my girlfriend and I went to a Red Sox game and we're sitting in, we got really good seats from somewhere. We're sitting down by right on the field, and they're about to start the game. They're like, throwing the first pitch tonight is Mr. and Mrs. Curran from Hyde Park. And they come out in the field and they're like, their son died tragically last year. And they started like a foundation and, to raise money and stuff. And they're like, they did this whole thing and they showed a picture of Craig up on the thing. I'm like, oh my God, that's Craig. And I'm like, so they throw the first pitch and they come off the field. I'll never forget, they were actually like smiling finally. I mean, because they were so like distraught when it happened. And the security guard like takes them off the field and they're like weaving through all the seats and sections and shirts and shit. They sit right in front of me, right? I'm like, what's the chances of that, right? So like I tap Mrs. Curran on the back and she turns and she looks at me and she like looked at me like I was Satan, and her husband looked at me and looked at her and she started freaking crying. She got up and left and he turned and he's like, Mark, don't take it personally, but like I think seeing you just brought everything back.
Best memory.
Yeah. And I'm like, I just didn't want to go through life feeling that way. It was just so horrible. And
was that kind of the biggest thing?
That was the worst thing.
Where it was like, all right, maybe this isn't the career that I want to turn my life into.
Exactly, but it's like when your parents when they're in a business and you live, sleep, and eat it all your life. Christmas dinner with your parents, and all of a sudden your father's beeper goes off. He's got to make a call, then he's got to go to the funeral home. Time stands still when someone passes away. Like you instantly got to respond and stuff. And that whole aspect of it, and then the fact that I hated being around dead people. It was so like depressing, but I was also making more money than friends of mine that graduated with master's degrees. I'm like, I hate this business. A year or so later, I had myself convinced I had to do something else. So a year or so later, I was working at the funeral home, and this guy, his name was Gino. I remember the weirdest things. He came in, and he's like, my mother died. And he was an older guy. He actually had one leg. He was in Vietnam. And he was this rough guy, and he comes in the funeral home, and he's like, I'm like making arrangements, and every 30 seconds his friggin' beeper would go off. And he'd be like, I gotta use your phone. Can I use your phone? Yeah, go ahead. He'd take the phone. Hello, Acme Pest Control. This is Gino. And he'd be like, yeah, no, I don't do animals. You gotta call a guy that does animals. And I'd hear the people say, well, do you have anybody you recommend? He'd say, no, I don't have anybody I recommend. Just go on the Yellow Pages and find someone that does animals. Click. And that must have happened 10 times during the arrangement. And finally he'd get one where it'd be like, oh, you have termites? Yes, I do termites. So I turn and I'm like, Mr. I'm like, can I ask you something? He's like, what? I go, who does animal removal? He's like, no one. I go, what do you mean no one? He goes, no one. I said, why? He goes, I don't know. It's one of those things where, you got to get a license and then you need special insurance. There was a guy we recommended for years, but he was screwing people and we don't recommend anyone now. I go, how many calls do you get like a week? He goes, a week? He goes, I don't know. He goes, but I get at least 50 calls a day. And I'm like, get out of here. And his wife was right there. And she goes, he doesn't get 50, but he probably gets 30. I go, is it like I felt him out. He goes, like, is it a seasonal thing? He's like, nope, my phone rings. He goes, if I wanted to, I could put 3 guys on the road just doing animals. I'm like, why wouldn't you? He's like, I can't climb a ladder, and I'm like, I can't. And he just went on and on about all the negative aspects of it, and I just like squeezed him like a grape, and I got every bit of information I could out of him. So 2 days later, by the time the weight came, I had already kind of done all my diligence on it. I'm like, Mr. Said, if a week from now, a year from now, a month from now, if I tell you I have my proper licensing and my insurance and a business name and all that, will you give me your wildlife calls? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, promise? He's like, absolutely. So I went to Mass Wildlife up in Westboro on Rabbit Road. I met with the guy, Tom Early, who's the head of licensing for everything. Mm-hmm. And I went there and he gave me this book. And he's like, you got to study this book, come back in a few months and take the test. And I'm like, all right. You have to get what's called a PAC license, a problem animal control license. Massachusetts is so strict on their laws. And I'm like, okay. So I go, well, what happens if I pass the test? He goes, you get your PAC license. What if I fail the test? You have to wait 6 months before you can take it again. So I'm like, okay. So I take the book and I go out to my truck and I just kind of thumb through it. I go back in, I go, dude, I say, can I take the test now? And he's like, if you want to. I go, well, what's the worst case? Because you're failing, you got to come back in 6 months. I go, okay. So I took the test and I got one answer wrong out of like I think 80 questions or something like that. And it was, if you live in Western Massachusetts, you wake up one morning and you notice the bark is around the base of all your coniferous trees. You know, your pines, your hemlocks, your spruce, cedar. What animal does it? It was all multiple choice too. Mm-hmm. And I looked at the thing and I'm like, porcupine. I know it's porcupine, but then I second guessed myself and I put in red squirrel and I got it wrong. That was the only porcupine what does it. But the rest of the questions, and the weirdest thing when I was taking the test, I'm like, these are the easiest questions to answer. Like, when do raccoons breed? And it was like, March. If I used to trap raccoons, I know when they breed. All these different things that was so...
like all your life experience you've had was just kind of like right here. Mm-hmm. And you're like, check.
Exactly. And to say it was a calling, like, I mean, I was like, holy shit. Like, I'm not like a real faithful person. I'm trying to work on being more faithful because I do believe there's power in prayer. I don't know if I believe that there's like a true heaven, but like if you pray and you're faithful to God, like he'll answer you. I've had it happen. My wife got sick years ago and I prayed. But then you feel like a dirtbag if you don't live out. If you say, hey, God, look, make my wife better, and then
this will be the moment
Yeah, and I'll be a good boy. I won't do this. I won't swear. I'll go to church every Sunday, and you do it for like a few weeks after or a month. If you're faithful to God, like I'm a firm believer that there's really a God and there's really somebody that looks over us all. And working at the funeral home, dude, I saw so many different things happen that I'm like, I know there's a God. And but anyways, yeah, I felt like that was my calling. So I got my license and I called Gino and he gave me all of his calls. And within, I don't know, 6 months, I couldn't keep up with the phone calls. I named my business Acme All Gone Pest Control. That was the only problem I had. All Gone Pest Control. And Gino called me. He was like, you can't call yourself Pest Control. And I'm like, why? He's like, because I'm Pest Control. How do I know you're not going to go out and start doing bugs and you're going to be a conflict of interest? You're going to compete against me. No more All Gone Pest Control. I'm like, okay. So then I named myself Bay State. And within a year, like I said, I was so busy. I used to stop at like a gas station and go to the bathroom, and I'd go in their bathroom and there'd be a yellow page. You guys don't remember yellow pages, do you?
Yeah.
Oh, you do? Okay. I'd open the yellow page and I'd rip the pest control pages out and then like take them home and I'd call the biggest to the smallest pest control company and I'd be like, hey, I was just wondering, do you guys get rid of squirrels? No, we don't. And they'd say, yeah, we do. Oh, what's your procedure? What's your pricing? They said no. I'd then say, well, look, I own a problem animal control, and they refer their work. And I remember I landed Terminex, the biggest pest control company in the world. And I talked to this guy and he was like, yeah, if you want to come in, we'll give you, they were happy to give me their work. There was no competition. And it got to the point within a year I was killing it financially, but I couldn't manage my books. Like, that's when I realized, like, shit, Mark, you should have done good in school because I didn't know how to do any accounting. My wife, who was my girlfriend back then, we got married within a year of me starting my business. She didn't know what the heck, she was a hairdresser. She didn't know how to do it either. This kid who I grew up with, Sean, who was the opposite of me, he was like academically the smartest kid. He worked for Arthur Anderson, which was like an accounting company. Something Anderson. They were going under, and he was an accountant, and he just got his master's degree in accounting. He used to work with me on the weekends, and one day I'm like, dude, I can't, he said right to me, he goes, the way you're managing your books, he goes, you're either gonna go to jail because you're not claiming your taxes the right way. He's like, and you see it all the time, like, you gotta, so I'm like, he's like, you should hire my father. His father was an accountant. I'm like, well, why don't you come and work with me? And he's like, really? I go, why don't you become my business partner? And he was like, all right. And basically I liquidated everything. We started from zero again. And maybe that's when I became basic. I was something in between Oligon and basic. But I'm still the president. He's the vice president. He came in, and God, if it wasn't for him, because my wife got sick 3 or 4 years after I started, and I went into a coma mentally. I didn't want to even get out of bed. I had 2 kids that were newborns, and I just the carpet got pulled off from underneath me, and I had zero motivation. I gained 80 pounds. I mean, I couldn't even wake up in the morning, never mind run my company and deal. I mean, I deal with people can really suck. When you do a job for someone, you're charging them a lot of money, and then they call you that night and have a question. You can't blow them off. You gotta my biggest problem always was I deal with the woman of the household during the day. She'd sign up for something, then the man of the household would come back that night. Whether the man of the household was a male or a female, it was still, you always had someone that was like, wait a second, you charged us $1,000 today and you came here. So they think you gouged them. So you're always on the phone. I mean, I was married to my phone. I had 2 phones and a beeper, and I couldn't keep up with it. But Sean came in, and he was awesome, and he ran the business for the year or 2 that I dealt with my wife being sick. To this day, yeah, I'd probably be able to retire by now if I owned the company 100% and didn't have a partner to split everything with. But I can say this, everything I do, I always have a partner. Because, when shit hits the fan, you need someone to help you, and you can't trust somebody unless they have skin in the game. So, yeah, that was it. And then,
do you have any crazy, any crazy stories when it comes to, rooming animals or...
Because, I mean, the way that we got connected was simply just by a job, right?
Well, that's the thing. When people say, what's the craziest thing? I can tell you some of the good things. Yeah, I met your dad. I went to your house. You guys had flying squirrels in Foxborough. And it's funny. Every job's the same, but every job's different. I remember going there, I went up in your attic, and I was like, what the frig? And it wasn't, the worst I've ever seen, but, you couldn't spit on the floor without it landing in squirrel shit. I mean, I didn't know you guys, right? And I think I was dealing with your mother most of the time, and I didn't want to turn around and be like, your house is riddled with flying squirrels, because they ruin your house. When you get them in your house, flying squirrels go in and they litter. So what that means is like a cat, they go to a certain spot to go to the bathroom, right? So you usually go in an attic of a house, a big house like that, and you find I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 spots where it's just friggin' piss and shit. In the insulation. They've been in there so long, and you guys lived in a real wooded setting. So your whole attic had piss and shit. But it's also to have your attic cleaned out, which is something we do, is brutal. It's brutal on you, it's expensive. You gotta leave the house for 2 days. We go in, clean everything out, and then disinfect it and decontaminate it, and then you gotta have new insulation. It costs thousands of dollars. I always say to people it's cheaper to move. And you're always gonna have that smell. Yeah, one of the good things is some of the people I met. I mean, I remember one time I got a call, because in the beginning I was doing all the emergency work at night too. We're the only company that's truly 24 hours, will come to your house anytime. So I got a call from a guy, from a woman. She's like, I live in Falmouth, I have a bat in my house. And you could hear someone screaming in the background. I'm like, all right, I'll get in. It was this big, beautiful house. And there's this woman, she was this big, good looking, whatever, probably in her 40s, and she's like, oh, the bat's over here, and it was up in the fan of the stove, and I go to grab it, and it flies around, and some guy keeps pulling his head, opening the door, and he's like, you get it yet? And I'm like, no, not yet. And he's like, he had himself locked in the bathroom, and finally, I get the thing, and he comes out, and I'm like, oh my God, dude, you're Cam Neely. And he's like, yep. And I'm like, you're one of the most badass Bruins that ever played. And he's like, yeah, thanks. And I'm like, you're scared of a bat? And he's like, yeah. I go, it's a friggin' moth with teeth. I'm like, you know, it's like a big bug. And he's like, he got so offended. I think he was drinking too. He got so offended, and he was like, you know, yeah, well, I don't like him. I've seen you on the ice with beating up people that like I wouldn't want to have anything to do with, and you're scared of this little bat. And it was like crazy how like, but his wife was like totally cool.
Yeah,
But
she's walking around with you.
yo, she's walking around me and like I've done jobs for Charlie Baker, who was a government jobs for so many. It's crazy to think of some of the people that I've run into through the years in Massachusetts. But I mean, one of the crazy stories. I mean, I got a call one time for a Tasmanian devil. A guy who lived in Peabody. He was in the mob or something, and he went to somewhere and bought a Tasmanian devil on the black market. And when he called me, I was like, he's like, my Tasmanian, he had like an accent, my Tasmanian devil got loose in my house. He goes, and the fucking thing's running around, and it's like, and I could hear this noise in the background. I was like, wah, wah, and I'm like, are you messing with me, dude? Because I get people call all the time that mess with their kids. They used to. And I'm like, he's like, no, it's for real, dude. It's for real. So I'm like, all right, I'll be there in an hour. He goes, how are you gonna get it out of here? I'm like, I'll figure it out. And I started driving there, and I got like 10 minutes away, and he called me. And he's like, oh, we got it out. And I'm like, well, I'm almost there. He's like, it doesn't matter, turn around, we got it out. I'm like, how'd you get it out? He's like, we opened the door. And I'm like, now the thing's running around? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, it's a Tasmanian devil. He's like, oh, they're not as bad as people make them out to be. I'm like, you were just screaming like a bitch about the thing, and now things. He's like, yeah. So I've gotten those calls. A lot of like, I hate snakes. I mean, I got a poisonous snake out of a lady's house in North Andover one time. It was up in the fluorescent light. You know what I mean? Like her kid was downstairs playing in the playroom in the basement and went to move something, and the snake bit at him. So, and when they called out, they were like, we got a what's it called? What's a poisonous water snake called?
Cottonmouth.
Cottonmouth. Mm-hmm. And water snake. And I'm like, we don't have cottonmouth water snakes in Massachusetts. She's like, I'm telling you, I grew up in the South. It's a cottonmouth water moccasin or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. So I was only 2 towns over. So me and my buddy, who works with me all summer, I think he met Jeff before he met Jeff. He's kind of a chubby kid guy. He's been working with me for 40 years.
Oh, was he there with the trees?
Yes, he was there. Yeah. He works with me all summer. Yeah, he's a school teacher, but then he works with me all summer. He worked with me since I started my company every summer. And he doesn't do heights, and he doesn't do snakes. And he's like, I'm like, we don't get the snake out for this lady. He's like, oh man, I don't think so. I'm like, keep it together. And I didn't even charge her.
Over Cottonmouth.
Why, you dealt with them before?
Oh no, I'm just thinking like, if they're like most like a water snake. Like the common water
But they're
snake?
poisonous.
Yeah. Water
Yeah.
moccasin.
I had internet. There wasn't internet back then, so I couldn't look at my phone and see. But like, I called Mass Wildlife on my way there. I'm like, this lady's saying she's got a watermark, and she's like, well, he's like, believe it or not, we're starting to get rattlesnakes, copperheads, and cottonmouth water.
Yeah, in Blue Hills,
Yep, that's right behind me.
they have those rattlesnake sightings. That's happened a couple times.
Well, that's funny you say that, because the end of the story, the Blue Hills gets brought into it. So I go to the house, and I go in the basement, and we'll look everywhere. We look up, and there it is, the fluorescent light. But I'm like, what the freak? It was like this thick, and it was like, it was getting the warmth from the light. So I'm like, how am I gonna get the thing out of here? Well, when you go into a house and there's an animal there, you try to get out. But if you do something to make it like hide in the house, now these people can't live in the house, you're kind of liable. I used to get paranoid of that stuff. So I'm like, I put up a step ladder, I get up, and the light was sagging. I look in, and like underneath the thing, and like there it is. I could see its tongue, and its eyes were all glossy. And I could see its head, like it was shaped like a diamond. It's a friggin' really a poisonous snake. The thing was so big though, and I'm like, there's no way it's really a poisonous snake. But so I turned to Jeff, and I'm like, here's the deal. We had one pair of snake tongs. I'm like, I'm gonna pull this light down, and this thing's gonna fall. When it hits the ground, you gotta grab it, dude. And he's like, okay. He's like, where are you gonna be? I'm like, I'm gonna be on the ladder. You know what I mean? But it was like, it wasn't that high, but like, I was probably 3 feet off the ground. He's like, I don't know. I'm like, Jeff, just focus, just grab it. Pretend it's just a hose. So I pull the light down, and the friggin' snake is coming down from the light. I'll never forget. And I swear to God, it looked at me and like tried to bite me. That's how aggressive this thing was. I'm like, oh my God. It hits the ground, and Jeff's trying to grab it, and I'm on the ladder, and the friggin' thing turns and it tries coming up the, I have shorts on, you know what I mean? It tries coming up the ladder, I'm like, ah! And I jump off the ladder, and the thing is just, it was so fast. It's trying to go up the wall, and every time he tried to grab it, it would like try to bite at him. He's like, I can't do this, and he runs out of the room. I grab the tongs, and I get the thing by like the halfway point, and my tongs were only like this one, and the thing's trying to reach and bite me. And I'll never forget, I was like almost 250 pounds then. I'm sorry, almost 300 pounds then. And that thing was so aggressive, and I was dancing around like I was getting out of the way. I finally re-grabbed it by the head, and I go to take it up the stairs through the lady's house. Jeff, we had a suitcase, a pillowcase with him. He wanted nothing to do with that. I'm like, open the door. I start going up the stairs. I turn to go through her kitchen. This thing spewed. It was right there with the story I told earlier about the guy, the decomposed guy, bring gloves. This thing was spewing this nasty shit out of it all over the place. I don't know, was it a defense mechanism or what? Or just squeeze it too hard? It stunk so bad. I go right through her like $3 million house, out the door.
Leaking.
Oh, it was, yeah, and I let it go on the lawn, and it's like, and she's like, I don't want that thing in my yard, I got kids. So I grab it again, and I had my Jack Russell with me, and he's like barking. I'm like, get away. So I got the thing now, and she's like, I do not want that on my property. I'm like, all right, I'll kill it. Well, the guy from Mass Wildlife said, if you do declare that it's a poisonous snake, do not kill it, call me back. We'll have a biologist come and get it. I'm like, this thing's poison. I can see its fangs and everything. We put it in the bag. I tie the bag up. I throw it in the back of the truck, and I leave. And we're driving home, and I call my buddy Armando, who's crazy and has zero fear of snakes. I've seen him grab like water snakes and they're biting him in the arm. He doesn't care. Not poison. Zero fear, and I'm scared of snakes. So we're driving. I'm like, I told him about it. He's like, dude, I gotta see this thing. I gotta see this thing. And I'm like, all right. I'm driving through Westwood right now. I'll meet you at the Starbucks. So I pull in the Starbucks, and the thing's in the back of the truck. And he comes over and he's like, I pull the bag. I'm like, look at the size of this thing. You know, it's all curled up in the bag. You see the body. He's like, let me see it. And I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, open the bag. And I had it all zip tied and shit. I'm like, why? He's like, anyways, he opens the bag and he's looking at it. He goes, oh my God. He's like, that thing is sick. And he puts the bag down on my tailgate of my truck. And the second that thing's body hit the tailgate, it was like electricity hit it. It just went right out of the bag. And now it's going, it lands on the ground, and the ground was hot. And it starts slithering away. And I swear to God, there's like this guy carrying his like mochaccino lattes and a thing out across the parking lot. He's like, oh my God. And he jumps and he dropped his drinks. Like the thing goes underneath. And there was this Asian guy, I don't know if he was on his phone or he was parked in his car. It went right into his car and it starts going up. I'm like, Armando, grab him. He said, I want nothing to do with that thing. I grab my tongs and I run over and like it was going up into like the end. And I grabbed it by the tail and I pulled it. I almost pulled the guy's car with it. That's how strong it was. And I got it out. There was ever cell phone cameras back then. I was business. Everybody in the stores like, oh my God. People were freaking out. I'm like, oh, it's just a snake. And they're like, is that poisonous? I'm like, no. I get it back in the bag. I bring it home. And I call Mass Wildlife. And I'm like, look, what do you want me to do with this thing? I go, it's absolutely psycho. And he's like, here's the deal. You can bring it to either the Quabbin Reservoir, which is like 3 hours away, some other place, and let it go, or bring it to the Blue Hills. I'm like, dude, I can see the Blue Hills from here. He goes, you have to let it go in like an aquatic setting, and you got to take a video of it. And he goes, and we might want the video, we might not, but he's like, either way, let it go. So I go down the street to this pond in the Blue Hills and stuff, and I let the thing go in the pond, and it slithered away, and I'm like, something just didn't feel right about it, but I let it go, and that was it. But that was one of the craziest stories. They did another snake one time for a guy in the south end. It was pretty. It was the guy up above had a rainbow python, a boa constrictor. It was from Brazil. He got on the black market. Yeah, and he let it. He had it in an aquarium in his apartment. I mean, I can tell you stories all day.
I mean, so like we've touched up on the whole morgue and everything, and the fact what kind of made you separate from that. But now, obviously, you showed a monster buck this year.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. So, what are...
Like, if you had to give hunting tips, like, if you had to give some hunting tips, like, what would...
I'd say, like, get a good gun, go out at night during archery season in a good spotlight, you know, and just shoot them. No, hunting...
Because, like, for you, like, I mean... You know, there are people that say that they're hunters and they don't really hunt, and then there's people that are real hunters and they're going out there trying to do their best, but sometimes for you, and I don't want to make it sound like it comes too easy where it's like you're not putting in the work, but like you have a way of. I mean, how many times have you been in a newspaper for a buck that you've shot, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said earlier, when I was younger, like hunting was something that like possessed me.
It's been your whole life.
Yeah, my whole life, and like I you know when I was a kid growing up, there were no deer in Massachusetts. In fact, I remember I was a senior in high school, and me and my girlfriend, I went over her house, and like we went for a walk, sitting down like watching the sunset, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm like, she's like, what? I'm like, that's friggin' deer shit, and she's like, huh? And I'm like, that's deer shit, and she's like, it looks like rabbit shit to me. I'm like, no, it's deer shit. And I picked it up and I put it in my pocket, and I brought it home and showed it to my father. I'm like, Dad, look what I found off of Walpole Street today. He's like, that's deer shit. There were no deer. Like when we grew up in Canton, like there were cornfields all around us. It looked like Ohio or something like that. Like there wasn't development like there is. And yeah, like so I used to always go to Maine and hunt, and I think that's part of the reason that I became a successful hunter is hunting in northern Maine. Like there are guys that have been going with my father up there for 20 years and never even seen a buck.
Yeah,
like,
that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
What's that?
I've never seen buck hunting.
Yeah, he's come with me. He's come with this. You know, Max come with me a bunch of times and never. I did 5 seasons now. He's never seen a buck. It's the hardest place in the world to hunt, in my opinion, white-tailed deer. Growing up and going once every year for 2 weeks, that was the only. I mean, I'd hunt small game around town, but going up there and trying to kill a deer, it's like I don't know. It's like shooting a gun at 200 yards all the time, and all of a sudden you get to shoot at 30 yards. So when deer came around in Massachusetts in like the late mid-90s, and when they came in, same with the turkeys and the coyotes, it wasn't like you get like they were massive. I mean, we had cameras, trail cameras back then, but massive deer. You know, it wasn't just like you get does and little bucks. Like in came these deer that were huge, and like I mean, like being as possessed as I was about white-tailed deer hunting, like all of a sudden we had deer back home. Like I never shot a deer with a bow. I didn't shoot my first deer with a bow till I was 20 years old. But when it came, it was here. So back to your question about why I became so successful. Like when deer first started coming around, I went through a real quick phase of if it was a buck or shoot a buck, I'd shoot it. But that came and went quickly, and then it was like I want to kill the biggest buck in the area I'm hunting. Once again, there were no trail cameras then, so
you just don't know.
You don't know, yeah.
You don't know what's out there.
And most of my like back when there was no trail cameras, if like I was at a coffee shop in the morning and some cop came in that works a midnight shift, I'd be like, hey, you see a lot of deer? Yeah, you've seen big ones? And sure than shit, someone would be like, dude, I saw the biggest buck last night crossing Messenger Street or whatever, and this and that, and I go down there and I just read the sign, right? Like in Maine, it was all about the weight of the deer. So like you find a track on the snow and you always want to find the biggest track. It was about people up there when you get a buck, it isn't how many points, how many inches, it's what did it weigh. And they have this thing up there called the Biggest Bucks in Maine Club. And I got my first buck in Maine that was it has to be over 200 pounds dressed. I got one that was 220 when I was like in the 7th grade. And then, yeah, now through the whole process coming and going, I've killed like 15 bucks in Maine that were over 200 pounds. And like my father, who's been hunting all of his life and is a pretty good hunter, you know, he can't hunt anymore, but like I think he killed 5 in his life that were over 200 pounds. I was getting one every year, and it was like I get on a track and like I just was possessed, and like I'd stay on him until I got him. If I didn't get him that day, I'd get back on his track the next day, and sooner or later I'd seal the deal. With bow hunting in Mass, it's definitely a niche where like someone like you, the guys that used to hunt out in the big country in the Midwest, totally different animal. The things that so the way that I found my big deer back in the day was just strictly reading the sign. If there's a giant bucks, big rack bucks, they just leave sign in a different way. They make massive scrapes. When they rub a tree, they destroy it. People always think if you see a big tree and it's rubbed, that's a giant deer. No, it could be the smallest deer in the world with skinny rack rubbing it. When you see like a willow bush or something like that, that's shredded like it went through a chipper and there's pieces everywhere, you know it's a big buck. And I miss those days of no trail cameras because you sit in a tree, you don't know what's coming around the corner. But my first giant buck that I killed was in '04, I killed one right where I live, and it was my buddy was driving home. He's a commercial fisherman. He's like, dude, I saw the biggest, and everybody says it's a big deer, but like, you ask about the
Yeah,
rack.
everybody's big deer is the
Yeah.
biggest deer they ever seen.
Sometimes it's a friggin' doe. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
But like, I always like, what was the rack like? And he's like, dude, it was like at least 12 points. You know, he knew what he was talking about. He's like, it was probably 30 inches wide. And on he went. And sure than shit, I went there. There weren't cameras back then, I don't believe. It was like '04. Maybe there was, but anyways, yeah, there were. Trail cameras had just come out, and I set one up there. And I got a picture of this buck. It was an 11 pointer. He wasn't 30 inches wide, but he was 27. He had like long ass mane, beams, mass. Me and my buddy were looking at him like, that's a freaking Boone and Crockett buck. And it's like right where I live. And there was another buck running with him that had like, it was like a cactus buck. It had like all these points going this way and that way. Its rack was only this wide. I'm like, but where it was living, it was like, I'm like, are these deer like on a suicide mission? Like, it was in an area where everybody and their mother was hunting. Like, and I'll never forget, I went there the opening morning and I got in my tree stand super early and like literally like a half an hour before light, it was like aliens. All you'd see is people coming with their headlamps, getting a tree.
Mm-hmm.
There must have been 10 guys hunting in there. So I got out of there and then jump ahead like a month later, there was no one in there. He shot their little 4-pointers. If you don't
Just chasing the big ones.
yeah, because one thing, it's changing now, but like I always loved about Massachusetts, you kill one buck. So some guy goes in there and shoots a little 4-pointer, well, he's done for the year. And next thing you know, like it went, and there was a parking lot across the road that I used to park in. The first morning I was there were like 8 trucks, and by November 1st, there were no trucks. So I was driving actually with my wife to, my daughter was, it was an '04, my daughter was, I think it was we were going to a baby christening or something. I'll never forget. It was Sunday, and we had snow. And we're driving, and I drive by the spot, and I'd only seen these deer in velvet. And there's a field. There in the field of both the bucks chasing this doe around. It was like mid-November, and like I jammed on my brakes. You can't hunt Mass on Sundays, but I'm like, oh my god, like, and she's like, what's going on? I'm like, look at these deer, and she's like, oh. I drop her off, and I thought they either got killed or died or something. I didn't get any pictures of them. And the cameras back there you take to get the film developed, so you kind of like, anyway, I go back there, I drop her off at the church we're going to, and I go back there, and I'm watching the deer, and I see them, the doe is definitely hot. So by that night, I already had 2 tree stands. I went and put 2 tree stands back up in the 2 different spots I thought were best. The next morning at like 4 o'clock in the morning on the tree, I had the wind right, and it was freezing cold out. It must have been, I don't know, 15 degrees, and there was like 8 inches of the fluffiest snow. And I'll never forget the sun coming up and the roar of the highway because you're so close to the roads. And I sat there, and at first light, a coyote came by, and I shot the coyote. I have 4 arrows in my quiver now, right? And well, by 10 o'clock that morning, it went from like 30 degrees, whatever it was, below zero, to like I had to take layers off. It was getting warm and the snow was melting. It was 10 o'clock and I'm like, I think I'm gonna get out of the tree. But I know that friggin' doe's hot, and I know that like these bucks are on her. And sure than shit, here comes the doe at like 80 yards, and right up her ass is the cactus buck or whatever with all the points. And he was like a 200-inch deer, but he was like, it was just, he was crazy. And he came by at like 80 yards, and I grunted at him. I think I yelled him, come over here. I did everything I could. He was not coming. And it's weird. Back then, snort wheezing was something that you saw every once in a while on TV or heard of, but I never done it and tried it. So I made a snort wheeze at the thing, and the thing just turned and like started stiff-legging and was like on a rope coming right to me.
Just a beeline.
Just a beeline, yeah. And like, I'm like, oh my god, I'm gonna get this thing. And I sit there, I got my bow, and he's coming right at me, and I pull my bow back, and I had gotten these broadheads. They were called Crimson Raptors. They were like, you gotta go.
Oh, yeah, I'm still off.
Okay. Yeah, they were called Crimson Raptors. They were like at the archery shop I go to. They were the funkiest looking broadheads. They looked like they'd kill you if you just looked at them. But they had like a weird design. I wasn't loving the broadheads, but anyways, the thing was coming straight in, and then he stopped and he looked up at me. I'm like, it's the only shot I got. So he was like probably 18 yards away, and I hit him right between the shoulder blades. I'll never forget when my arrow hit him, it like cocked to the right when it hit the spine. And I'm like, I should have he should have just dropped right there, right?
Yeah.
And he blew and took off with the arrow sticking out of him and went across the field and like went out of sight. But there was snow and I'm like, I could see blood. I'm like, I'm gonna find this thing. And I just sat down in my stand and I'm like, oh God, look, this is unbelievable. I'm gonna get this buck. Before I could even lower my bow, right up the trail that him and the doe came down, because the doe went by, is the other buck, the typical, the big wide one. And he came down the trail and he turned and they took a right and they both went out of sight, him and the doe. But where they were going, there's a road. I'm like, he's gonna turn and come back. They didn't know where to go. Half an hour later, the doe comes back and I sat there saying the buck's gonna come. And I waited like over an hour. We went from like 8 inches of snow to like, you could see, like, I could see the footprints from the buck I shot earlier. And they were like melting out right in the dirt.
Yeah.
The snow was just vanishing. I might have got 60 degrees, I don't know. So I got out of my tree, off the story, I'm like, that buck's bedded in that piece. And I snuck around, there's all these old rock walls, and I come down, and there he is laying there, looking away from me, like God put him there. Like, I'm like, oh, you couldn't ask for a better scene. The wind's in my face. I got within 30 yards. I was behind this thorn bush. And I started playing that waiting game, but like I kept saying to myself, the snow's melting so fast that like it's not going to be here by the end of the day. I'm like, and all I could think about was the other buck, and finally, because I want to track him, and finally I'm like, screw it. And I creeped around the thorn bush and I pulled my bow back. I went to pull my bow back, and the freaking buck stood up, and I was like froze, and he's like looking right at me. I'm like, oh shit! But I was behind this thorn bush, and I stayed still for as long as I could. And finally, he wagged his tail and he laid back down. I waited like another hour, and I was like, I remember my legs were like all cramped. And finally, I'm like, screw it. I just stood up, I drew my bow back, and he stood up again. He was looking back at me. And I shot, and I'll never forget, my arrow like went, it looked like it went right in his asshole. But it went like, and he like haunched up and ran away and went out of sight. And I'm like, oh my God. Now I had one arrow left, I forget why. I just wounded two of the biggest bucks I've ever seen in my life. And like, you know what I mean? And now the snow's melting. So I'm like, screw it. I like turned my hat sock back or like around the other way. I'm like, I gotta get aggressive. Like I split my switch. So I went after that buck that I hit and I did a big circle on him. And I could see him kind of like haunching away. Like,
No, this is the typical now.
The typical, yeah. And I shot him again, and I knew I hit him good, and he went out of sight. I run over to the, but now I have no arrows, right? So I call my buddy up, and I'm like, I hit the other buck just now. I'll be right there, but he was coming from Plymouth. Took another hour for him to get there. Anyways, we go over to look for the first buck I hit, and the snow was just gone. He ran out to a golf course, there was no snow. And then when the snow melted, it took the blood with it.
Yep.
And I ran into a roadblock, and I'm like, so that deer got away. He broke the state record in Massachusetts that was like 30 years old. He was the #1 buck ever killed with a bow. I think he was like 178 inches, and the record was like 161. Because deer weren't.
Yeah, there weren't.
Yeah,
It's
but
not like it is now.
in Western Massachusetts there was always deer. It was a dominant time. And anyways, yeah. So he was a state record. The end story on the other buck is like a year later, someone called me and they're like, "Oh, this guy, I think his name was like Bill, found your buck and has it, the non-typical one." I'm like, no way. Well, the right thing to do is, if I find a buck that you killed, whether it's the biggest buck in the world, I'm going to give you, you know.
Yeah.
I meet the guy in a parking lot, I'll never forget, and he fucking tried strong on me. He wanted it was either $20,000 or $30,000 for the rack. I held the rack in my hand, and I'm like, dude, are you kidding me? And he's like, yup. He goes, I knew you'd be psyched, and he was like, he played me like a fiddle. He was like, dude, this thing's unbelievable. I go, where'd you find it? He goes, I found it in the swamp down by the pond. I'm like, that's right where he's heading. And I showed him the picture I had of the buck. I told him the whole story. And then at the end, he's like, I'm like, look, I said, whatever it takes, dude, I want the thing. I want to mount it. He's like, I'm thinking like 30 grand. I'll never forget him saying, I'm like, are you an asshole? And he's like, yeah. He goes, well, if you change your mind, I'll have it. And it kind of like soured the whole thing. Yeah, I was like, whatever. But then a year later, I called him. Everybody was like, you should just call him. And so I called him again. He's like, I sold it. He sold the friggin' rack to some antler buyer. It was the craziest rack you'd ever see in your life. It was only like friggin' 12 inches wide. He had it scored at like 195, 95 inches. I have to find the picture. I know I have a picture of it. I'll send you a picture of it later on.
Yeah.
That was it. I went to the awards banquet. Yeah, I was in magazines and stuff. I went to the awards banquet. They gave me the award for the biggest buck ever killed. It was the biggest buck ever killed in Massachusetts with a bow, all time. Typical, and they scored it non-typical because it had a kicker, and it broke that record. And then 2 years later, some guy killed one that broke that record. And I went to the banquet. You know, now I'm number 2. He's number 1. Killed it in like a Boy Scout. He worked at some Boy Scout camp, and he literally killed it like a Boy Scout bow. And yeah, but it's a crazy story. But anyways, so 2 years after that, I found this other buck that had like double drop tines, checked all the buck. It was a true booner, yeah. I hunted him every day. I mean, my first state record buck, I can't sit here and say I hunted him that hard. I literally sat in the tree like 3 times. And then, you know, I told you the story. But the next buck I went after, my second state record buck, that thing, I hunted that. I got pictures of him, and he had drop tines. He was like 29 inches wide, and he was insane. He was like a dream buck. I mean, mass, everything. I hunted that son of a bitch. I hallucinated one time. I hunted him every day. I hallucinated one time. I saw him behind a tree, and like I drew my bow back and went like this, and he wasn't there. And like I realized after, it wasn't real. Like,
it's just messing with you.
It was messing with you. That thing was so like, everywhere I was, he was always the opposite spot. When I learned that year, because you always learn something. Like I remember Tom Brady saying like years ago, like when he plays football, like he said something like he learns something new every time he plays. And like I learned something new every time I hunted one of these bucks. And what I learned with that buck is you got to keep a simple plan. I had like 9 to 12 tree stands set up. Now when I hunt a big buck, I have 2 tree stands set up because you got to have at least 2 because of the wind, unless you don't want to hunt certain days. So I have 2 trees set up, and I convince myself that every time I sit and don't see him, that's what do I say? When you hunted a big buck, every time you sit, you don't see him. What does that mean? That mean the next day is a better chance because you're not going to look back at a season and say I sat every day and never saw the buck. That's really bad luck. But I hunted him that whole year. I'll never forget that particular year. It was Christmas morning, and I had like, I don't know, 12 or 15 times I had sat all day and didn't get him. Like if it was like pouring rain or something like that, I wouldn't sit. Yeah. But it was Christmas morning, and Christmas Eve, I said to my wife, that son of a bitch is going to be moving tomorrow. I got to sit. And she's like, tomorrow's Christmas morning. And I'm like, I know. She's like, you got like a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old daughter. And she's like, I'm like, yeah. And I'm sitting in the tree, and I'll never forget saying to myself, like, my 2 kids just woke up Christmas morning, and they believe in Santa then, and like, they're sitting home waiting for their father to come home from home. And the reason I'm telling you this is because people don't realize the sacrifices, like, to kill these big bucks, like, that, like when I hunt, like, I mean, it's ruined so many relationships I've had in life. Like, I'm hunting a buck, and a friend comes in, he's like, oh, I got permission from the guy on the street, I'm gonna hunt him. I'm like, no, you aren't. And he's like, you know, like, or if you want to sit there, go ahead, but don't shoot that buck. I'm after him. And like you start feeling like an asshole. People make the comments of, well, it's only a deer. I don't have that mentality when it comes to a giant buck. Anyways, that particular buck, I hunted him all year. And then the next year, I had that fucker so pegged. I found his sheds that year. I knew what he was doing every minute of his life. And on Halloween, that's usually when I really kick it into high gear. I won't hunt every day until like they stop. Like Halloween morning, I rattled them in, and I'll never forget. He came in. He was in this pine thicket. I could see this much of one of his tines. And I knew it was him. Yeah, I just knew it was him. And he came out. I'm not saying I'm not a good shot. I am. Like this kid, he's a moneymaker. When he shoots at something, he always nails it. I'm the opposite. I always deflect an arrow, or I rush my shot. I still get buck fever. But like in that buck, when you heard my story about the other 2 bucks, you know what I mean? I'm not that guy that zilches them right through the kill zone, ever. Something always happens. And I know what's going to happen when it does. But that buck, I rattled him in, and he was like 37 yards going along. He was so like dedicated, like he was so committed to what the hell was that noise I heard. And he came in, he was looking around, and he was coming down along this like ridge. And I'm like, he's 37 yards right there. But if he kept going, and he would have came around the back, I would have like an 18-yard chip shot at him. I took the 37-yard shot. And remember a broadhead called the Buck Blaster? You remember that?
A buck blaster.
It was a Wasp made it. It was a typical regular 3-blade, I think they're illegal now, 3-blade broadhead, but it had these friggin' wings.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Are
yeah.
they fixed?
It's a fixed
The
and
3 were fixed, but then it came out like this.
the
Yeah.
blades.
And
No,
once it hits it, they flay.
They flay
out.
back. They're like, oh, we're gonna try out this buck blast and see what does or don't. And it literally like disembowels and
Punches like a
stuff.
50 cal bullet through it. Like that's what it looks like.
It
It's
is, but the
crazy.
problem with them is the blades. It's 100 grain broad, so the blades were like paper thin. But anyways, but it made like a 4-inch hole. So I shot that buck at 37 yards, and the arrow was going right for him, and he compressed, and it hit him right in the spine. And I remember the story I told you earlier about how the arrow kicked to the side.
Yep.
This arrow kicked, but it kicked down instead of up when it hit his spine. So if it kicked up, it would have just been. I mean, the deer would have been probably dead because of the trauma, but it kicked down, and the deer ran over this ridge and vanished. My father and my cousin and somebody else came in. Max, what happened with that one?
He took his rack. We looked it up and he was like, look at this thing, dude. This thing is huge.
So when I kill it, I'll circle it like a coyote. Then I'll walk away for a half an hour and I'll come back. I'm just weird about stuff, and I gotta get a picture of the deer in the state that he died. And the same thing when I find shed antlers. I won't touch them until. Sometimes it might not be till the end of the day. Like it's just weird.
Why
Like
is that?
I don't know. It's just like it's like a respect thing. Like I look at the animal. Sometimes I cry. I get emotional. Sometimes I'm just like, oh yeah, I take a picture, and it's just weird. I don't know what
I
it
always
is.
say a prayer, right? Like I'll put my hand on the animal every
Yep.
time I kill a deer, and I'll just say a prayer right there. And
Max, what do we do every day when we're tracking deer and hunting? What do we always say?
We say like a prayer.
Say the prayer. Let's see if you remember it.
Oh, like the Our Father, go out in heaven, hallowed be his name.
That's the Our Father.
Wait, he knows them. He knows them all.
We say the Our Father, the Hail Mary, and then the Serenity Prayer, which is because my father used to say it when you're.
I don't really know those.
Well, we always say a prayer. Yeah. So it's funny you say. I always say a prayer when I kill a deer. I thank God. Yeah.
because that's like the coolest thing of hunting, right? It's like this deer, dude. It's so beautiful. This deer has spent years, like, surviving, right?
Dude, I know. Yeah.
All
You're
the
right.
weather, being in the cold every single day, right? And then you're out there, and the blessing of you getting to take this deer's life and eat it,
Yeah.
dude.
Dude,
And just as
I
a
don't know you that well, but like you saying that, like gives me so much respect for you because it's the same thing I.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
But I just want to say this because you brought up buck fever. And for anybody that doesn't know what buck fever is, right? And this ties the whole entire thing together, right? The prayer, what's going through your mind.
Yep.
Because you can't, there's nothing like hunting deer.
Mm-hmm.
And when a doe comes in, it's amazing, right?
Yeah.
But when a buck comes in, that you, like, and for me, it's like everything slows down and I can think about a conversation that I could end up having with somebody if this goes the right way, right? Because it's like, okay, you've been sitting out in the cold. Sometimes it's miserable. Sometimes you maybe go out 3 times in a row and you don't even see a squirrel, right? And maybe your hopes are down, but then that moment comes,
Yeah.
and you know it's like, well, it's now or never.
Yeah.
And
So much margin of error that can be had. Yep. Go ahead.
yeah, and it's like picture being in Antarctica with no clothes on. Like when I get buck fever, it is like my heart is racing like crazy, right? If you told me to hold still, I just want to punch you in the face,
Yep.
right? Like the adrenaline spike is insane. So to say like,
If you don't get that feeling, then you're not a hunter.
yeah, no, and if you don't have the feeling, then you haven't put an ounce of thought into it
Yeah.
the rest of the day, right?
Dude, me too, man. I get the giggles, dude.
I laugh, dude.
And like I start getting teary-eyed, and like the buck I killed this past year. Oh man, I'm sitting there. I sat for like 55 hours
Yeah.
before I saw a buck.
Mm-hmm.
And like, man, this dude comes in, he looks like a moose. And I pull back, and I'm just like,
Brutal,
Yeah.
dude.
I like can't breathe.
Nothing
I'm
you
like,
can do to control it.
So you're talking about like when the moment comes, like you said, it's almost never the perfect shot.
Never.
It's like
Yeah.
for people that don't understand what buck fever is like, can't understand why that might be, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't care how many times you practice on a target,
it doesn't
you
matter.
practice in your backyard. When it's game time and
Yeah.
that actually is the moment that you're in,
Yep.
it's night and day difference. So just as a clarifier,
So much on the tree. I love shooting sitting down. It's because you feel so stable. and like I had to stand up, and I was like, oh my god, and like my hands, the arrow was shaking on the thing, and like, yeah, it's like you're right on the money. People don't know what goes through your mind when you make a shot, and then once again, how many times, like I'd love to see the arrow go right behind the shoulder and know for sure. I don't think I've ever killed a big buck without, when I'm calling someone to come help me find or whatever, being like, I don't know, and you know, it's horrible. Like I go on, but back to that buck, I remember, yeah, he ran down this hill, and I thought for sure, like, he's not dead, but that buck blasted broadhead, when it kicked the bottom blade, I take, when I got them, I take like I'm like a damn pathologist or a forensic guy, trying to figure out what killed him, and I hit like that. There's a vein, your dad knows, below the spine that I hit, and the thing bled out, but when we were looking for it, we were kind of spread out. There was blood everywhere, and my cousin saw it first, and he ran right over. Look at the size of this thing. He like picked it up, and like, oh my god, that's like, it like almost ruined a part of it for me. But yeah, it's just weird. But yeah, no, I mean, I could go on. Like I've killed my biggest buck was my heartbreak buck. I hunted him for 3 years, 3 days, no, a week before. I shot him at like 40 yards. Stupid shot. I should have waited, and I hit him through the arm right here. Mm-hmm. But when I shot, I thought the arrow went, like, I thought I hit him through the heart. And there was blood everywhere. And then it ran out, and I'm like, I wounded him. I mean, I had already been out, like, looking for, like, buzzards and birds, thinking he was dead. And then I got a picture of him. He was still alive, and he was fine. And I killed him, like, a week later. And, yeah, like, I mean, yeah, I've killed, like, 8 bucks in Massachusetts over 170 inches. And I've killed, like, 5 that were over 180. The one I killed this year I thought was my all-time biggest buck. We had him officially scored like a month or two ago. He's the biggest buck killed in Mass this year, but he's not. He's probably like number 5 or 6 now. But, so he, when I got him officially scored, it's weird. You can do typical and non-typical. The guy that scored him, like, you got to register him as a typical. So he was like 178. As a typical.
He has that kicker.
Yeah, he had like some weird shit going on. But I kept him non-typical, he'd be 188. But then he gross scores over 190, which I don't understand. See, like...
It doesn't really make sense. Like, the atypical one should be like a gross score.
Well, like I always say this to people. Like, if you're out in Ohio hunting and you're like, oh my god, Mark, I just killed a buck and you can't send me a picture, I'm going to say, what does it score? You're going to say, well, you're not going to say, net score is 162. You're going to say, yeah, I scored it, it's 178 inches, whatever it is. Like, that's like, you know, you're taking something, it's like, I don't know, it's like, you're taking something away from what the deer created on his head, you know, and people don't realize too, like, they go on and on, I'm not gonna, we should, maybe some other time, but like the buck I killed this year, I shot him and wounded us in 2015, no wait, it was 2017, and he was a 150-inch buck then. I found his shed that year. I thought he had died, and I killed him this year. So we did all the backwards math. The year I wounded him, and it had to be at least 3.5. He was a 50-inch deer. I killed him this year, so like he had to be like in 2017. Let's just say he was born in 2013. It's like the deer's 12 or 13 years old this year. I mean, he looked like an old man that was like, you know, like he had this big, huge body, but you could see his ribs, everything. That like, had no teeth in his head. And I didn't know this till this year, but when they age a deer, all they can do is get you to 10, and anything after 10 is a guess. Because they cut the teeth, is what the guy told me. He's like, the deer's definitely over 10. I go, well, how old is he? He goes, he could be 15, which would be insane. Like, but the deer where I live, they have the easiest lives, you know? Yeah. And years ago, this guy approached me from Northeast Big Buck, Jeff Brown, who's the owner of it. And we started this thing called Metro Madness. It was, I don't know if it was a podcast or something like that, but like, we created a website, I put money into it, and I just couldn't keep up with it as far as like, being I had to go on the thing every day and like answer things, this and that, but like there was this thing we did it was called the Metro Minute, where once a week, maybe once a month, we put on some stupid tip. And the things I was saying on it were like, to me, like so stupid. I don't know, like things about broadheads or thing about like stupid shit about like I just said, like have 2 tree stands set. And people would come back and be like, wow, that's the best advice I've ever gotten. And I'm like, I don't know, when you do something all your life and you're so passionate about it and you become good at it, things that are stupid to you are genius.
Like gold.
Like gold, exactly.
Yeah, I realized too, like hunting, you don't need. I remember when I first started hunting, I was like, okay, I need my little hand warmer, I need a backpack, I need this. And like, when I started getting to bow hunting, I'm like, the less you have, the better.
Yep.
The less you have, the better. You got pockets, throw your hands in there, let the bow sit on your lap, and just wait.
Here's my
That's
problem
it.
though. I'm gonna lose 90% of the stuff that I bring in the woods with me. Right? Yeah, so like I gotta worry about my bow. Okay, I don't. Less I have.
It's like when you go away on a trip, I always say, like when we go up to Maine or something like that. I'm always trying to remember this, that. I'm like, as long as I have cash, as long as you have money, and like your phone or whatever, like you're good to go. You're right, the money. How many days? Like the buck I killed this year, I got in my tree at, I think it was 4 o'clock, which is late. But I got to my spot at 3, but I was on a phone call. By the time I got done with the phone call, this, that. By the time I got my tree, it was 4 o'clock. I go to set up all my camera gear, which takes me 10 minutes, and here comes the friggin' doe that this buck was after. And like, I am so adamant about getting my kills on video. So I videoed the buck with my cell phone for like 8 seconds, put the phone away and shot him, and I was like, I had a Tacticam, that didn't work. The SD card was full, so I must have turned it on. And like, it sickens me because, and I was on the phone with some idiot about something stupid, and I'm like, why didn't I just end the phone call when I got there? But you know, I felt, so it's like, but like, yeah, when it comes down to it, you get one shot usually at a giant buck if you're lucky. So yeah, if you're worried about this and that, I go in the woods, all I need is my rangefinder, my bow, my release, and that's it. Yeah, it's nice to have thermal, so you can see if there's something, like it's nice to have your video camera going, but when it comes down to killing them, you got to just make sure you have, you know, the right stuff. But either way, yeah, I mean, yeah, I got so many stories when it comes to hunting. We'd be here for a day and a night.
Yeah,
I mean,
100%. And dude, you mentioned the name earlier.
oh yeah,
Dude, so I heard a story about there were like, you and him were doing something and some people came out that were checking this property and you guys were in an argument. You were in a truck bed or something. He was in the truck bed.
that one's like, yeah. So like, he's one of the most interesting people you'll ever meet in your life. And we hunted actually, I met him when I killed my first state record buck. Him and his cousin, I knew his cousin came over to my house and they wanted to see the buck and stuff, and I showed it to them. And he's like, oh, I love hunting. I'd love for you to take me sometimes. We became friends and we started hunting together, and he's just a crazy SOB. You can look at a picture of him. I'll send you a picture of him. He looks like the devil. He's like the weirdest looking kid, and he's an absolute animal. Like I was telling your father the other day, like we're closing one time, did business together and stuff, and we were at a closing one time, like something, and all the people there with their suits and ties, the realtors and the lawyers and stuff. And I sit down, and he's like, and I'm like looking around. All of a sudden, he goes, "Will you stop?" And I'm like, "Stop what?" And he's like, "Stop." And I'm like, "What?" He's like, "You keep staring at her tits." And I'm like, in front of everybody. I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "You keep staring at Regina's tits." Regina was like the closing lawyer, and she's like sitting there like this, and like then he starts laughing, and like I'm the asshole in the room, and he's the funny guy. And like, it's the way out. He could say stuff to people. He'd get away with things he'd say and do like nobody else.
And there's no filter?
No filter. And like, animal of a kid. But that story was, we went to, it's kind of a gross one, but it was the end of the year, we were pushing a piece of woods. And we all met at my house. My house back then, I was in a neighborhood, and they were building all these other houses in the neighborhood. So it was like Saturday, and there were realtors and people. We all get there, and we hop in my buddy's pickup truck, we get in the back, and he drops us off on this side, and then the shooters get on this side. So we're waiting for the shooters to get set up, and I had to take a shit, you know what I mean? Like, so I'm sitting there, and I'm like, oh my God, I gotta take a shit, and he's like, oh, whatever. So I'm like, I'll be right back. So I go walk, and I go behind a tree, and I squat down. I know, it's gross. And all of a sudden, like, I look up, and there he is with his fucking camera, and he's like, ka-ching, ka-ching. Cameras had just come out of cell phones then. He's like, oh. I'm like, you asshole. Like, he was like, oh. Well, by the time we were done pushing, I must have got 30 calls from my wife and and the kid, like, sent the picture to everybody, and my buck ass, you know what I mean? Like, it was as graphic as it could be. I'm like, what the fuck's wrong with you? What's the big deal? And I'm like, oh, we used to argue. Like, I wanted to kill that kid so many times, and he wanted to kill me. But anyway, so now, like, we're driving back to my house, and on the way there, like, my phone's blowing up, like Like my mother got a picture of it. Like he sent it to everyone. I don't want to say everybody. It was so embarrassing. So we get to the house and I jump out of the truck and he goes to go over the tailgate and he was kind of overweight back then. And I opened the tailgate while he's trying to get out and like he straddled and he friggin' fell in the road. The street was all like rough graded and he fell and like he had these huge cuts on his elbows and his knees. And he gets up and he looks at me. He's like, "Oh, I'm gonna kill you." Well, all the people in the neighborhood are like watching because it was a loud situation. So I start running away, and next thing you know, he was so mad. He grabbed his bow out of the back of the truck, and now there was a house that was just framed. And I run into the house, and I look, and I see him with his bow, and I'm like he's the type of kid that if you pissed him off and you had a gun, he'd shoot you. He had such a temper. He's an Italian kid. So I'm like, I peek out the window, and all of a sudden, whoosh, I'm not going to exaggerate and say the thing went right by my head, but like the arrow sticks right into the side of the house. I'm like, "What the frick are you doing?" Like, "I'm going to kill you." And I start running up into the house. It was just like, and he was shooting arrows at me. So finally, like, I come out of the house, he was out of arrows, and I'm like, "Stop." And I think someone threatened to call the police. And like the next day, I think he left or something, and like the next day he's like, "Dude, they were just field tips." And I'm like, "Kill me." He goes, "It wouldn't kill you." And he really believed in his fucking demented mind that if he shot me with a field tip, it was gonna hurt. He's like, I'm like, "Dude, eye for an eye." I'm like, "You cut your elbows and knees." I'm like, "Do something back." He's like, I'm like, "You would have killed me." He's like, "It wouldn't have killed you." He'd argue about everything. He argued that it wouldn't have killed me, but it would have. And I think I told you at the time we were in the tree and he was below me. I was videoing him and we used to sit there for hours and get bored. So I was like cleaning out my backpack and I had this bottle of like 3-year-old Kronk Buckjoy dough piss. And like I'm looking at it, it was like sludge, and I'm like looking down at him and he's looking around. He always had the stupidest look on his face. So I turn, I'm videoing it, I poured it and it went drip. It had like a drip, 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 drip on his head. And he looks up and his mouth was open and it went drip, 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 and went right into his mouth. He's like, "Ugh!" And he starts spitting it out. He's like, "What the frig was that?" So I'm like, "Oh, nothing, it was just water." He's like, "Blah, blah." So he reaches in his quiver, and I'm above him now, and he kicks it. I was like, "I'm gonna kill you." And he's trying to stab me with the arrow, but it was like a Montec, like cut on. I'm like, "Dude," and like I'm trying to like climb up the tree to get away from him, and he's trying to stab me. And I'm like, literally, I think he was contemplating shooting me, but I was too close to him, and he's like trying to stab me, and then, yeah, it was like prime time. We ruined the hunt, and then a few days later, he was above me, even though I was videoing him, and he did something that I'm not going to say on camera, but he did something to me to get me back, and it was pretty disgusting. I'm sure you can fill in the blanks. But the thing about him was he lived for hunting like I did. He was so possessed, but then like someone hit a switch. He was an electrician on an electrical company. He made good money at a great company, but we'd be talking sometimes, sitting there for hours, and he'd always be like, "I want to make like real money. I don't want to just get by. I'm supposed to be a millionaire." Shorter than shit the kid did. He went out and started building houses. He found an investor, and now he builds in like Newton and Chestnut Hill. I went by his house the other day that he's building right now to live in. He's almost done with it. His foundation is 100 yards long. His front windows in his house are so big, he got them imported from somewhere. It looks like something Trump would live in. He's got a Ferrari. He goes to Beverly Hills every year, celebrity watching. Call me and be like, "Yeah, I saw Jim Carrey," or something like that. He goes to the Hamptons. You have to meet him. He's just a character.
I guess it's probably getting to.
Yeah. No, I love talking about stuff like this. Yeah, it was great doing this with you guys.
We appreciate you, man. And even then, we were thinking about it, dude. I think it would be awesome to like have a little documentary about you. And like, follow you and like see what you do, and
because I mean, in all reality, like I had a couple of jobs in high school, right, working at Lawton's Farm, landscaping work, but the best work was ever that phone call from you or that text from you. Because I mean, just even if it was as simple as like that job selling firewood.
Oh yeah.
Man, that literally like bought me gave me my money back because I had an Audi TT at the time, and I was fixing it every week. It felt like.
Dude, you look like a trained circus bear when you're so big you get out of that like a tin can.
Yeah, it was.
No, I remember the time I sent you to that. I know we got this guy up in was it Acton? What was that town that you went to? You and Gracie went.
Yeah, it was like Lowell. Was that Lowell?
It was on that steep hill with the pond.
Yeah, it was around
There's
Boston.
no way you don't remember it. It was
No,
fun.
I remember it because the dude, it was for the
Great guy. The guy had money galore. He had these beavers that were literally, it was a pond, so they were very hard to trap, and they were killing all of his trees, like these big, beautiful white oak stuff. So he said to me, I need some trap them. So I tried trapping for like a month, couldn't trap them. So he's like, I'm like, the only thing you can do, he's like, I see it all the time. I'm like, someone can sit there with a pellet gun and shoot the thing when it comes out. And he's like, he goes, can you do that? I said, I'm not doing it. I said, not for nothing, but like, I can't sit there like every night, you know what I mean? It was like an hour away. So I called Colin, he's like, yeah, I'll go. And this poor bastard sat there for what, like a week?
I think it was 4 nights because it was during winter break for school. I remember because my sister was home and everything from college.
Yeah.
And me and her went the first night, and I think I may have went 3 more times.
But I remember one night, I met him outside my house to give him my pellet gun. I had like these high-powered pellet guns. And it was so cold out. I'm like, dude, you sure you want to do this? He's like, yeah, I'm good. And like, there's Gracie, who's 90 pounds, soaking wet and wearing boots, right? With him, like, what are you going to do? I'm going to help him. And I'm like, wow, you're a good sister. So they sat there that whole night. Finally, the next day, I went there to pull my traps out, and sure than shit, the beaver was in one of the traps. It was completely decomposed. It's like, because it was dead. Mm-hmm. And like, I'm like, oh my God, this thing's been in here for like, he was hunting like a ghost, you know?
And I swear the guy was saying, like...
He was.
I mean, there was... I thought maybe there was another one that he was seeing, but he was determined that they were still...
He was.
Raising hell, but then you go. I thought I was just, like, sleeping the whole time. I'm like, I'm not seeing this thing.
I know.
And
I felt so... I mean, the guy, you're right, the guy was so convinced. He's like, it was here last night. He goes... It was, you guys weren't able, it was here last night from 8 o'clock till midnight. I was chewing on my trees. And there was damage done to the trees. Like, it was adding up with what he was saying. It must have been another beaver, but you sat there for that. And then all the jobs I give you and Will, this year was the worst year. I don't because of the weather. I was saying to you, Dad, I got 1 beaver job this winter. And, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 coyote jobs. And the thing is, you're in school. Like, tons of dead deer this year, but like, yeah, I pinch myself sometimes, and I'm so blessed to be doing this for a line of work, you know what I mean? But yeah, I mean, obviously, once you're out of school, it'll be good. I remember the firewood thing, that was a grind.
that was awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate you coming on, brother.
Yeah, man, nice talking to you guys, yeah. Yeah, and I think this thing's gonna be great for you guys. I hope it takes off and does things.